The Hell's Canyon Primitive Trail, a little-known and seldom-used trail, lies on the Idaho side of the Snake River in Hell's Canyon. This presentation, as written by Wally Kimball, is intended to document, inform, and aid in the preservation of both its historic and recreational value. While this section of the trail is rather short, only about 7½ miles in length, it traverses through the heart of Hell's Canyon, a section of the canyon that is otherwise accessible only by boat. It is a rather short trail in length, but make no mistake, this is a rugged trail. A trail that is sometimes difficult to follow, and in some places, it can be hazardous. In fact, for all intents and purposes, the trail has been abandoned and forgotten. This primitive section of trail has not been maintained since perhaps the 1990s. In places, the trail is overgrown and difficult to follow. In some very short sections, rockfall hides the trail.
This is a good example of the rock work that's been completed by the CCCs, but it's easy to miss because right here in the middle of the trail, it's been completely overgrown. And when I was coming from the other direction, I didn't know where the trail was. But I got on this side and now it's plain to see.
In some short sections, it appears no trail pad was ever constructed, leaving only game trails to be followed. When the river flows rise to very high volumes, perhaps 34,000 CFS and higher, the trail lying very close to the water's edge can flood. The bridge over Granite Creek, as shown on many maps, no longer exists, requiring a stream crossing that can be hazardous during the high waters in spring runoff. The best concise map of the Hell's Canyon Primitive Trail, although the trail is not given this title, can be found in the Wild and Scenic Snake River Boater's Guide, published by the United States Department of Agriculture. Map 1 of that publication shows the extent of the trail, beginning at Lamont Springs and extending northward downstream to Granite Creek. Page 14 of the guide, preceding Map 1, is a brief description of the river rapids and campsites used primarily by the river users. In addition to the boater's guide, the general location of this primitive trail along the Snake River can be found on maps dating back to the 1900s. There are also other maps which are more recently dated and published by the USDA Forest Service that also show this trail. It is usually titled as Trail 102 or Snake River National Recreation Trail 102. Many maps do not show this trail at all. Evidence such as prehistoric pit houses and pictographs in the general area indicate this streamside trail or route was traveled and lived upon thousands of years ago. Even though most of the evidence along the primitive trail is gone, in more recent history, we know that miners, stockmen, and ranchers used this canyon beginning in about the 1870s. An old fence and gate still exists that was intended to block horses and cattle from traveling up and down the trail. At Lamont Springs, which is also called Lake Bar, an old cabin which is very difficult to see from a distance still stands in a grove of trees. The book titled Hell's Canyon by Robert G. Bailey, published in 1943, is one of the earliest books documenting the history of the canyon. In the book titled The Story of Hell's Canyon, published in 1977 by Gerald J. Tucker, the author, Gerald, states that settlement in this wild, rugged, upper section of the canyon began in the early 1880s. It can hardly be argued that other than access by boat, this section of Hell's Canyon downstream from Hell's Canyon Dam to Granite Creek is the most inaccessible and rugged section of the canyon. It is due to the harsh nature of this remote, inaccessible canyon, the rugged primitive condition of the trail, and both the prehistoric and historic use that makes the Hell's Canyon Primitive Trail unique. With some minor trail maintenance clearing some overgrown sections, and maybe a few cairns to aid in route finding and navigation, and perhaps the addition of just a basic, fundamental hiker's bridge crossing Granite Creek, this section of trail would be a great extension of the Snake River National Recreation Trail 102. Well, this is the end of Part 1. Part 2 will discuss getting there, and we will break down this primitive trail into even shorter sections to aid hikers in finding this route. Thanks for watching.